Hey, what's going on, guys? It's like running. I just figured I start early in the morning with a quick video, a quick read as well. So yes, today I was taking a look at a book called The Rulebook for Arguments, fourth edition by Anthony Weston, and it was on the list of a few of the other books that I wanted to read, and I figured I'd get this one out the way. This is the actual copy of the book. It's a Rulebook for Arguments. It's the fourth edition. The fifth edition is out and available on Amazon. You can go pick that up, but the fourth edition is available as well on paperback, and it's really affordable as well. It's got pretty good reviews. It's a 4.5 star, over 360 ratings so far. It's pretty good book. I recommend it. But I definitely want to get into it today. Read some of it today, and then if you guys are willing to hit the panel, by all means, come through, join. Let me know if you want the link, and I'll post that. But I'll go ahead and start reading. So again, this is a rule book for arguments by the author Anthony Weston. So let me go ahead and go to the actual book here. All right, so here's an introduction. Let's see. So, the introduction here, what's the point of arguing? Many people think that arguing is simply stating their prejudices in a new form. This is why many people also think that arguments are unpleasant and pointless. One dictionary definition for argument is disputation. In this sense, we sometimes say that two people, quote, have an argument, end quote. It's a verbal fist fight. It happens often enough, but it's not what arguments really are. And that's really like the key point of why I'm deciding to do this little quick video here, just because a lot of times people think that they're having arguments, especially valid arguments, and they're not. They're just really having a back and forth session, but it's not really a true scaled out argument. In this book, quote, to give an argument, end quote, means to offer a set of reasons or evidence in support of a conclusion. Here an argument is not simply a statement of certain views. It is not simply a dispute. Arguments are efforts to support certain views with reasons. Arguments in this sense are not pointless. In fact, they are essential. Argument is essential in the first place because it's a way of finding out which views are better than others. Not all views are equal. Some conclusions can be supported by good reasons. Others have a much weaker support, but often we don't know which are which. We need to give arguments for different conclusions and then assess those arguments to see how strong they really are. And this would be a good point for those who are interested in debating as well, whether you debate academically or you debate online, debate against each other, whether it's friends or family or associates. This would be a good, just an essential piece to have in your library for those of you who are interested in improving your arguments and making sure that you have the upper hand in a lot of these discussions. Here, argument is a means of inquiry. Some philosophers and activists have argued, for instance, the factory farming of animals for meat causes immense suffering to animals and is therefore unjustified and immoral. Are they right? We can't necessarily tell just by consulting our current opinions. Many issues are involved. We need to examine the arguments. Do we have more obligations to other species, for instance, or is only human suffering really bad? How well can humans live without meat? Some vegetarians live to very old ages. Does this show that vegetarian diets are healthier, or is it irrelevant when you consider that some non-vegetarians have also lived to very old ages? You might make some progress by asking whether vegetarians live to old age at a higher rate, or might healthier people tend to become vegetarians rather than vice versa? All of these questions need to be considered carefully, and the answers are not clear in advance. And that means you have to ask those key questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And it's necessary that you answer those questions because that is the beginning for your inquiry and to also help you with your research. And that's critical. Argument is essential for another reason too. Once we have arrived at a conclusion that is well supported by reasons, we use arguments to explain and defend it. A good argument doesn't merely repeat conclusions. Instead, it offers reasons and advice, evidence so that people can make up their minds for themselves. If you become convinced that we should indeed change the way we raise and use animals, for example, you must use arguments to explain how you arrived at your conclusion. That is how you will convince others by offering the reasons and evidence that convinced you. It is not a mistake to have strong views. The mistake is to have nothing else. And I agree. You can have strong views. Everyone has strong views. But can you back up your views? Can you have something tangible that people can say, okay, not only is he just heavily opinionated, but do you actually have something to support your opinion? And that's what we're going to get into later on in the text here. Argument grows on you. Typically, we learn to argue by assertion. That is, we tend to start with our own conclusions, our desires, or opinions without a whole lot to back them up. And it works sometimes. At least when we're very young, we could be better, right? Real argument, by contrast, takes time, practice, marshaling our reasons, proportioning our conclusions to the actual evidence, considering objections and all the rest. These are acquired skills. We have to grow up a little. We have to put aside our desires and our opinions for a while and actually think. And this is key. This is key. School may help or not. In courses concerned with teaching ever larger sets of facts or techniques, students are seldom encouraged to ask the sets of questions or arguments to answer. Sure, our Constitution mandates the Electoral College. That's a fact. But is it still a good idea? For the matter, was it ever a good idea? What were the reasons for it anyway? Sure, many scientists believe that there is life elsewhere on the universe, but why? What's the argument? Reasons can be given for different answers. In the end, ideally, you would not only learn some of these reasons, but also learn how to weigh them up and how to seek out more yourself. Mostly, again, it takes time and practice. This book can help. Moreover, the practice of argument turns out to have some attractions of its own. Our minds become more flexible, open-ended, and alert. We come to appreciate how much difference our own critical thinking can really make. From everyday family life to politics, science, philosophy, and even religion, arguments are constantly offered to us for our consideration, and we may in turn offer back our own. Think of argument as a way to make your own place within these unfolding, ongoing dialogues. What could be better than that? So now here's the outline of the book. It's just basically how the book is going to be laid out for your comprehension and understanding. And this is pretty much what the author's trying to get across to you. So this book begins by discussing fairly simple arguments and moves to extended arguments and their use in essays and oral presentations at the end. Chapters 1 through 6 are about composing and assessing short arguments. Short arguments simply offer their reasons and evidence briefly, usually in a few sentences or a paragraph. We begin with short arguments for several reasons. First, they are common. In fact, so common that they are part of everyday conversation. Second, longer arguments are usually elaborations of short arguments or a series of short arguments linked together. If you learn to write and assess short arguments first, then you can extend your skills to longer arguments, essays, and your oral presentations. A third reason for beginning with short arguments is that they are the best illustrations, both of the common argument forms and of the typical mistakes in arguments. In longer arguments, it can be harder to pick out the main points and the main problems. Therefore, although some of the rules may seem obvious when first stated, remember that you have the benefit of a simple example. Other rules are hard enough to appreciate even in short arguments. Chapter 7 guides you into sketching and then elaborating an extended argument, considering objections and alternatives as you do. Chapter 8 guides you from there into writing an argumentative essay. Chapter 9 then adds rules specifically about oral presentation. Again, all of these chapters depends on chapters 1 through 6, since extended arguments like these essentially combine and elaborate the kinds of short arguments that chapters 1 through 6 discuss. Don't skip ahead to the later chapters then, even if you come to this book primarily for help writing an essay or doing a presentation. The book is short enough that you can read it through from the beginning if you do. When you arrive at those later chapters, you will have the tools you need to use it well. Instructors might wish to assign chapters 1 through 6 early in the term and chapters 7 through 9 when the time comes for essays and presentations. 2 appendixes close out the book. The first is a listing of fallacies, which is very, very important to be able to recognize fallacies. We may actually go into that another time. Fallacies are basically types of misleading arguments that are so tempting and common that they even have their own names, which is true. And the second appendix offers 3 rules for constructing and evaluating definitions. Use them when you need them. All right. So we're going to go to short arguments. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure I grab this link here. So I can 1 second. I can post this into YouTube as well. Okay. All right, so that should be fixed. Okay, and so I think you guys are being patient. All right. Okay. Now we can get back to the reading. Right, take this away. All right, so we're gonna get back to short arguments. So here's some general rules for short arguments. Arguments begin by marshaling reason and organizing them in a clear and fair way. Chapter 1 offers general rules for composing short arguments. Chapters 2 through 6 discuss the specific kinds of short arguments. Identify premises and conclusion. Now, this is very, very key. You got to understand what the premise of the argument is, or in the case of a debate, what the premise of a debate is. You want to make sure that the argument or the purpose of the argument is crystal clear, that you understand what's being argued, and then of course who's taking what position, who's taking the negative and the positive, who's taking the affirmative and the negative. You want to know who's taking which side. That way you don't end up in arguments where you waste a lot of time and energy and brain power and y'all end up agreeing with each other. So that's critical and it's key. Here it says the first step in making an argument is to ask yourself, what are you trying to prove? What is your conclusion? Remember that the conclusion is a statement for which you are giving reasons. The statements that give your reasons are your premises. Consider these lines from Winston Churchill. Quote, I am an optimist. It does not seem to be much use being anything else. This is an argument, not just an amusing quip, because Churchill is giving a reason to be an optimist. His premise is that, quote, it does not seem to be much use being anything else. End quote. Premises and conclusions are not always so obvious. Sherlock Holmes has to explain one of his deductions in The Adventure of Silver Blades. Quote, a dog was kept in the stables, and yet though someone had been in and had fetched out a horse, the dog had not barked. Obviously, the visitor was someone whom the dog knew well. End quote. Holmes has two premises. One is explicit, the dog did not bark at the visitor. The other is a general fact that Holmes assumes we know about dogs. Dogs bark at strangers. Together, these premises imply that the visitor was not a stranger. It turns out that this is the key to solving the mystery. When you're using arguments as a means of inquiry, you sometimes may start with no more than the conclusion you wish to defend. Stated clearly, first of all, maybe you want to take Churchill a step further and argue that you and I should be optimists too. If so, say so explicitly. Then ask yourself what reasons you have for drawing that conclusion. What reasons can you give to prove that we should be optimists? You could appeal to Churchill's authority. If Churchill recommends optimism, who are you or I to quibble? This appeal will not get you very far, however, since equally famous people have recommended pessimism. You need to think about the question of your own. Again, what is your reason for thinking that we should be optimists? One reason could be that optimism boosts your energy to work for success. Whereas if you feel defeated in advance, you may never even try. Optimists are more likely to succeed, to achieve their goals. Maybe this is what Churchill meant as well. If this is your premise, say so explicitly. This book offers you a ready list of different forms that arguments can take. Use this list to develop your premises. To defend a generalization, for instance, check chapter 2. It will remind you that you need to give a series of examples of premises, and it will tell you which sorts of examples to look for. If your conclusion requires a deductive argument, like those explained in chapter 6, the rules outlined in that chapter will tell you what types of premises you need. You may have to try several different arguments before you find one that works well. All right, subsection 2, develop your ideas in a natural order. Short arguments are usually developed in 1 to 2 paragraphs. Put the conclusion first. followed by your reasons, or set out your premises first and draw the conclusion at the end. In any case, set out your ideas in an order that unfolds your line of thought most clearly for the reader. Consider this short argument by Bertrand Russell. Quote, the evils of the world are due to moral defects quite as much as to lack of intelligence. But the human race has not hitherto discovered any method of eradicating moral defects. Intelligence, on the contrary, is easily improved by methods known to every competent educator. Therefore, until some method of teaching virtue has been discovered, progress will have to be sought by improvement of intelligence rather than of morals. End quote. Each sentence in this passage prepares the way for the next one, and then the next one steps smoothly up to bat. Russell begins by pointing out the two sources of evil in the world: moral defects, as he puts it, and lack of intelligence. He then claims that we do not know how to correct moral defects, but that we do know how to correct lack of intelligence. Therefore, notice that the word therefore clearly marks his conclusion. Progress will have to come by improving intelligence. Getting an argument to unfold in a smooth sort of way is a real accomplishment. It's not easy to find just the right place for each part, and plenty of wrong places are available. Suppose Russell instead argue like this: the evils of the world are due to moral defects quite as much as to lack of intelligence. Until some method of teaching virtue has been discovered, progress will have to be sought by improvement of intelligence rather than of morals. Intelligence is easily improved by methods known to every competent educator. The human race has not hitherto discovered any means of eradicating moral defects. This is the same premises and conclusion, but they are in a different order, and the word therefore has been omitted before the conclusion. Now the argument is much harder to understand, and therefore also much less persuasive. Premises do not fit together naturally, and you have to read the passage twice just to figure out what the conclusion is. Don't count on your readers to be so patient, and that's facts. Expect to rearrange your argument several times to find the most natural order. The rules discussed in this book should help. You can use them to figure out not only what kind of premises you need, but also how to arrange them in the best order. Subsection 3, start from reliable premises. No matter how well you argue from premises to conclusion, your conclusion will be weak if your premises are weak. Quote, nobody in the world today is really happy. Therefore, it seems that human beings are just not made for happiness. Why should we expect what we can never find? And here it says the premise of this argument is a statement that nobody in the world today is really happy. Sometimes on certain rainy afternoons or in certain moods, this may almost seem true. But ask yourself, if this premise really is plausible, is nobody in the world really happy today? Ever? At the very least, this premise needs some serious defense. And very likely, if it's not just not true. This argument cannot show then that human beings are not made for happiness, or that you or I should not expect to be happy. And that's true. You have to be able to back up what's being said when you make a premise like that. And so instead of saying nobody in this world today is really happy, a way to kind of bring that point into a much more effect would be to either refer to an incident that occurred, such as a mass murder or mass shootings, or maybe a terroristic attack, or something traumatic that would be an opportune event that would allow this statement, such as nobody in the world today is really happy, to make more of an effective premise. So you have to, for instance, like the Boston situation, nobody's really happy about what happened in Boston. It's not a happy event that occurred, but even though that situation happened, there may be people other places in the world that are happy. And so this is the problem with this premise. It's just flawed from the beginning. Sometimes it is easy to start from reliable premises. You may have well-known examples at hand or reliable sources that are clearly in agreement. Other times it is harder. If you are not sure about the reliability of a premise, you may need to do some research and or give an argument for the premise itself. See Rule 31 for more on this point. That's going to come later. If you find you cannot argue adequately for your premises, then of course you need to try some other premise. Subsection 4, be concrete and concise. This is very, very vital to your premise argument. Avoid abstract, vague, and general terms. For example, quote, we hiked for hours in the sun, end quote, is 100 times better than, quote, it was an extended period of laborious exertion, end quote. Be concise too. Airy elaboration just loses everyone in the foggy words. No. For those whose roles primarily involve in the performance of services as distinguished from assumption of leadership responsibilities, the main pattern seems to have been a response to the leadership's invoking obligations that were co-commitments of the status of membership in the societal community in various of the segmental units. The closest modern analogy is a military service performed by an ordinary citizen, except that the leader of the Egyptian bureaucracy did not need a special emergency to invoke legitimate obligations. Yes, in ancient Egypt, the common people relied on the conscripted for work. Like, and we call that word salad here too, Cyrus. You call that word salad with that no section where, like, it's just instead of properly expressing the premise, instead of properly expressing the point that you're trying to make, you basically try to fill up, your argument with a bunch of words, and so therefore it renders it ineffective. And like stated earlier, you're gonna lose the reader, you're gonna lose your audience simply because they're not able to follow you and clearly understand your verbiage. Sometimes verbiage is needed, but then there are times, especially with arguments, where it's not necessarily beneficial. Hey, Free Spirit. Hey, babe. I see you in the chat. Thanks for the support. Got you coming through. All right. I'm almost done here. Make sure you guys hit the like button and share the video. Okay, so we're going to go to subsection 5. Again, I'm reading the book here. It's called A Rulebook for Arguments, the 4th edition by Anthony Weston. And basically, this book is basically a way to help those who like to argue improve their arguments. It's a way for them to make sure that their arguments are sound and concrete, make sure that they have strong premises, and also that they follow the rules of argumentation. And so this is good not just for debate purposes, but also for just two people who may enjoy having a back and forth, argument or dialogue. And there's a difference between arguing versus argumentation when it comes to this type of back and forth. Sometimes people can give their opinions, and then it's a battle of opinions versus actually having a concrete argument. So here I'm still in the chapter 1. It's about 9 chapters in this one. It's a very short book, but it's ready to go. So here it says, build on substance, not overtone. Offer actual reasons. Don't just play on the overtones of words. No, having so disgracefully allowed her once proud passenger roads to fade into obscurity, America is honor bound to restore them now. Like, it's completely misleading. It's supposed to be an argument, but it's flawed. So this says this is supposed to be an argument for restoring more passenger rail service, but it offers no evidence for this conclusion whatsoever. So there's some emotionally loaded words, again, word salad, shop worn words too, like a politician or automatic. Did passenger rail fade because of something America did or didn't do? What was disgraceful about this? Many once proud institutions outlived their times after all. We're not obliged to restore them all. What does it mean to say America is honor bound to do this? Have promises been made and broken? By whom? Much can be said for restoring passenger rail, especially in this era when the ecological and economic costs of highways are becoming enormous. The problem is that this argument does not say it. This argument definitely lacks a lot of detail, and it lacks a lot of research. We'll keep going. We're left exactly where we started. Overtones, actually, it lets the emotional charge of the words do all the work. This is true. And therefore, it really does no work at all. We're left exactly where we started. Overtones may sometimes persuade, even when they shouldn't, of course, but remember here we are looking for actual concrete evidence. Likewise, do not try to make your argument look good by using emotionally loaded words to label the other side. Generally, people advocate a position for serious and sincere reasons. Try to figure out their view, try to understand their reasons, even if you disagree entirely. For example, people who question a new technology are probably not in favor of going back to the caves. What are they in favor of? Maybe you need to ask. Likewise, a person who believes in evolution is not claiming that her grandparents are monkeys. And again, what does she think? In general, if you cannot imagine how anyone could hold the view you are attacking, you probably don't understand it yet. And we say that a lot in debates, whether it's academic debates, whether it's debates online. We see that a lot where people have arguments and they put a lot of emotion behind their argument, but they are not thorough with their argument. And then it's a clear visual cue that this person just probably studied or read surface level material. Like they haven't really gotten deep into their own argument, let alone their opponents. And so they just got surface level. And so they really don't know what they're talking about. They have an idea and they have emotion to back that up, but that doesn't win the argument. It leaves them at a disadvantage. Subsection 6. Rule 6 actually. Use consistent terms. Short arguments normally have a single theme or thread. They carry one idea through several steps. Therefore, couch that idea in clear and careful chosen terms and mark each new step by using those same terms again. So here's not how to have a good short argument. When you learn about other cultures, you start to realize the variety of human customs. This new understanding of the diversity of social practices may give you a new appreciation of other ways of life. Therefore, studying anthropology tends to make you more tolerant. Here's how to properly argue that same premise. When you learn about other cultures, you start to realize the variety of human customs. When you start to realize the variety of human customs, you tend to become more tolerant. Therefore, here's the conclusion. When you learn about other cultures, you tend to become more tolerant. Much more simple, much more clear and concrete, and less confusing, less word salad, because now the reader or the audience can follow your argument. And you're saying, well, this equals this. And then once you have this, that equals something else. And so the conclusion is A is going to equal B. And so that yes version might not be stylish like the no version, but it is crystal clear where the no version hardly seems like the same argument. One simple feature makes the difference. The yes argument repeats its key terms, while the no version uses a new phrase for each key idea every time the idea recurs. For example, quote, learning about other cultures is redescribed in the no version's conclusion as studying anthropology. The result is that the connection between premises and conclusion is lost in the underbrush. It is interesting underbrush, maybe, but you are still liable to get stuck in it. Reusing the same key phrases can feel repetitive, of course, so you may be tempted to reach for your thesaurus. Don't go there. The logic depends on clear connections between premises and conclusions. It remains essential to use a consistent term for each idea. If you're not concerned about style, and sometimes you should be, of course, then go for the tightest argument, not the most flowery. I think a lot of people do that too, where they try to have the more flowery, the more presentable argument, but it has no strong foundation. It can be uprooted. And so it's better to have a more concise argument. It's clear and concrete rather than worrying about appearances. But sometimes appearances is needed, for example, within academic grounds. So here's a more concise premise of these two yes or no premises. When you learn about other cultures, you start to realize the variety of human customs. a realization that in turn tends to make you more tolerant, which is a proper way of addressing it. Hey, what's going on, Chris Harris? Going on, bro? Link is in the chat. You want to hit up. Again, I'm reading about the book. It's called A Rulebook for Arguments. It's the fourth edition by Anthony Weston. And so today we're just going over what makes strong arguments, strong premises, and then the rules of these arguments. I'm sure you got some experience in this particular sector. You as well, Free Spirit. So if you guys have any commentary or anything to add, definitely come through if you got time. The link is pinned at the top of the chat. All right, you can talk about studying anthropology and the like if you wish, as you explain in each step in turn. All right, so here is the second chapter here. We'll end with this chapter. So these are generalizations. So again, we're talking about arguments, making sure that arguments are strong, making sure that they're clear, they're concise, and we're talking about short arguments. And the reason why we're talking about short arguments for those who just popped in is that the short arguments are generally what the larger arguments are. They're usually made from those shorter arguments, so they're compiled in many short arguments to make a collective. But you have to understand how to properly format short arguments so that they are effective, that they're concise and clear and concrete. So here's generalizations. Some arguments offer one or more examples in support of a generalization. For example, women in earlier times were married very young. Juliet, in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, was not even 14 years old. In the Middle Ages, 13 was the normal age of marriage for a Jewish woman. And during the Roman Empire, many Roman women were married at age 13 or younger. This argument generalizes from three examples: Juliet, Jewish women in the Middle Ages, and Roman women during the Roman Empire. Too many or most women in earlier times. To show the form of this argument more clearly, we can list the premises separately with the conclusion on the bottom line. And this is how you would be able to make it more clear and then even reword it if necessary. So here's really the four premises, or the three premises with the conclusion. Juliet in Shakespeare's play was not even 14 years old. Jewish women during the Middle Ages were normally married at 13. Many Roman women during the Roman Empire were married at age 13 or younger. Therefore, the conclusion is women in earlier times were married very young. It is helpful to write short arguments in this way when we need to see exactly how they work. When do premises like these adequately support a generalization? One requirement, of course, is that the examples be accurate. Remember, rule 3, start from a reliable premise. If Juliet wasn't around 14, or if most Roman or Jewish women weren't married at 13 or younger, then the argument is much weaker. And this is where sources come in to back up your argument. This is where having something concrete to say, okay, let's prove this particular statement. So how would we prove if Juliet wasn't around 14? Well, we would need an account. We would need someone to be able to say, okay, at the time Juliet met Romeo, she was 14 years old. Or she was 13, whatever the age they would say she was, but that would back up an argument. Or if most Roman or Jewish women weren't married at 13 or younger, you could get a census, especially in Rome or even in Israel, you can get a census to see how old most of the women were when they got married. And that census at that time will back up your claim. And that way you won't even need to make a hasty generalization. You can just come out with facts. All right, so if none of the premises can be supported, there is no argument at all. To check an argument's examples or to find good examples for your own arguments, you may need to do some research. And I agree, research is necessary. If you're gonna argue, you better have done some research. If you're not gonna do any research and you're gonna have an argument, good luck. Because you're not gonna get too far, especially if you don't know what you're talking about and you have zero experience in it. You're not gonna get too far. Research is necessary. But suppose the examples are accurate, let's say. Even then, generalizing them is tricky business. The rules in this chapter offer a short checklist for accessing arguments by example. So here's rule number 7. Use more than one example. A single example can sometimes be used for the sake of illustration. The example of Juliet alone might illustrate early marriage, but a single example offers next to no support for a generalization. Juliet alone might illustrate early marriage, but a single example offers next to no support for a generalization. Juliet alone might even just be an exception, which is very, very true. One spectacularly miserable billionaire does not prove that rich people in general are unhappy. More than one example is needed. Here's not how to have a strong premise for your argument. French fries are unhealthy, high in fat. Therefore, all fast foods are unhealthy. That's a generalization. Here's how to properly lay that premise out to where it's not a generalization. So it says French fries are unhealthy, high in fat. Milkshakes are unhealthy, high in fat and sugar. Deep fried chicken, cheeseburgers are unhealthy, high in fat. Therefore, all fast foods are unhealthy. So even though that's a generalization, it's a lot better because now you have something to match up with it. You can look at the list of things and say, okay, well, all of these things exist to some degree within fast food restaurants. So for the most part, these are considered unhealthy. We got somebody in the building. Let's see who this is. Oh, there you go. Hey, what's going on, Chris? Chris, you there? You gotta connect your audio. What? Yeah, yeah. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. What's going on, bro?
Hey, what's going on, man? Hey, thanks
Yeah,
for showing up, man. You had any
yeah, you putting
comments?
on some educational. Yeah. I want you to explain. I want to go into an upcoming conversation that I have, and I heard you say something. And I want you to explain everybody the position when somebody asks you, when a lot of these guys try to challenge people on these debates. And I want to explain the title here that I was challenged on. Torah, which one is better for our people, Torah or Egypt? Can you explain the fallacy in that title alone?
Well, which? So the first question I would have, again, I'm a proponent of whenever you're asked the question or whenever a statement's being made, you gotta ask who, what, when, where, why, and how. And this is for clarity. If you don't get that from that statement, then you have to ask it. So with this particular statement, or really debate topic, the first thing I'm asking is, well, what are you comparing between the two? How are you determining which one is better? What are you providing to show the aspect of each is better? Are you talking about culture? Are you talking about rulership? Are you talking about food choices? Are you talking about health? Like, what are you talking about? So he has to, it's very vague and it's very surface level. He has to be able to go deeper into that. Are you there? I think you might have muted out. Chris, if you're there, you might have to unmute.
No. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I was saying. It's just, it's very vague. Like he has to, when he's saying which is better, you need to clarify how you're referring to this betterness that exists. And well, that's what I'm saying. Are you talking about food choices, health? Are you talking about rulership? Are you talking about just the population status? Like, what are you talking about in reference to which is better? I can't say one is better than the other without referring to why one could be better. You know. So if I'm saying for example, the Boston Celtics are better than the Miami Heat, in what reference? I am talking about basketball teams, but still, like, what reference am I saying they're better? Am I saying they're overall a better team? They're better coaching? Do they have better players? They have better talent? Do they have a better basketball court? Like, what's being discussed? And that's what needs to be really questioned with that particular position he has, he needs to give out an actual premise. So yeah, that's pretty much my commentary on that. Chris might be busy, might be occupied. I'm gonna go ahead and finish up this generalizations until he gets back. All right, so we just did the comparison between two separate premises of generalizations. One says French fries are unhealthy; they're high in fat. That means all fast foods are unhealthy. Whereas the other says, which is the proper way to do it, says French fries are unhealthy, they're high in fat, milkshakes are unhealthy, high in fat and sugar, deep fried chicken and cheeseburgers are unhealthy, which means they're high in fat. Therefore, all fast foods are unhealthy. And even though they're both generalizations, the second generalization has three other things to match up with the first statement, which would be French fries are unhealthy. And that is milkshakes, deep fried chicken, and cheeseburgers. And so it's being promoted that these other things, along with French fries, are also in fast food establishments. And so it's being also proposed that these are the most commonly purchased things. So the conclusion being all fast foods are unhealthy now makes more sense. Not saying it's accurate, it's still a generalization, and you still can get in trouble with it, but it's just the proper generalization to have versus the improper one. So here it says the yes version may still be weak. Yep, Rule 11 returns to it, but it certainly gives you much more to chew on, so to speak, than the no version. In a generalization about a small set of things, the strongest argument to consider all or at least many of the examples. A generalization about your siblings should consider each of them in turn, for instance, and a generalization about all the planets in the solar system can do the same. Generalizations about larger sets of things require picking out a sample, such as genetic generalizations like DNA, for example. We certainly cannot list all women in earlier times who married young, as that our argument may offer few women as examples of the rest. How many examples are required depends partly on how representative they are. A point the next rule takes up. It also depends partly on the size of the set being generalized about. Large sets usually require more examples. The claim that your town is full of remarkable people requires more evidence than the claim that, say, your friends are remarkable people. Depending on how many friends you have, even just 2 or 3 examples may be enough to establish that your friends are remarkable people, but unless your town is tiny, many more examples are required to show that your town is full of remarkable people. All right, so here is Rule 8. Chris, come in anytime you need to, and we'll pick up from where you last dropped off about that debate topic. So Rule 8, hope you guys are following me.
Okay, I'll come in. I'll come in a minute. Let me get a second to get somewhere quiet. Okay.
Okay. All right, so this is Rule 8. Make sure you guys are following me. Again, if you have any questions, any concerns, definitely let me know. Again, so here we are looking at this book. It's called a rule book for arguments by Anthony Weston, 4th edition. This is the actual cover of the book. You can pick this up on Amazon. It's paperback for under $10. It's a good thing to have in your arsenal, especially if you love to argue or if you love to debate. It's definitely something good to have. So make sure you guys keep that. I'm going to go back to the book here. So Rule 8, use representative examples. Even a large number of examples might still represent the set being generalized about. A large number of examples of ancient Roman women, for instance, might establish very little about women generally. Since ancient Roman women were not necessarily representative of women, the argument needs to consider women from other early times and from other parts of the world as well. So, for example, everyone in my neighborhood favors McGraw for president, therefore McGraw is sure to win. This argument is weak because single neighborhoods seldom represent the voting population as a whole. A well-to-do neighborhood may favor a candidate who is unpopular with everyone else, Student wards in university towns regularly are carried by candidates who do poorly elsewhere. Besides, we seldom have good evidence about neighborhood views. The set of people eager to display their political preferences to the world is probably not a representative cross section of the neighborhood as a whole. A good argument that McGraw is sure to win requires a representative sample of the entire voting population. It is not easy to construct such a sample. Public opinion polls, for instance, construct their samples very carefully. They learned the hard way. The classic example is a 1936 poll conducted by the Literary Digest to predict the outcome of the presidential contest between Roosevelt and Landon. Names were taken, as they are now, from telephone listings and also from automobile registration lists. The number of people polled was certainly not too small. More than 2 million ballots were counted. It is easy to see what went wrong. The poll predicted a wide victory for Landon. In the event that Roosevelt won easily, in retrospect, it is easy to see what went wrong. In 1936, only a select portion of the population owned telephones and cars. The sample was sharply biased towards wealthy and urban voters, more of whom supported Landon. Polls have improved since then. Nonetheless, there are still worries about the representativeness of their samples, and they still regularly forecast elections wrong. For example, these days, most of my students don't have landlines at all, only cell phones with unlisted numbers. The pollsters aren't calling them. Phone polls might actually be getting less representative again. It is often an open question then just how representative a given sample may be. Anticipate this danger. Do some research. Juliet, for example, is just one woman. Is she representative of all women in her time and place? Definitely not. In Shakespeare's play, Juliet's mother says to her, quote, think of marriage now, younger than you, here in Verona, ladies of esteem, are made already mothers by my count. I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. This passage suggests that Juliet's marriage at 14 is not exceptional. In fact, 14 seems to be a little on the old side. In general,
Ooh, okay.
I know. In general, look for the most accurate cross section you can find of the population being generalized about. If you want to know what students think about some subject at your university, don't just ask the people you know or generalize from what you hear in class. Unless you know quite a range of people and take quite a range of classes, your personal sample is not likely to mirror the whole student body. Similarly, if you want to know what people in other countries think about the United States, don't just ask foreign tourists. For of course, they are the ones who choose to come here. A careful look at range of foreign media to give you a more representative picture. All right. Before we go to rule 9, hey, thanks Free Spirit for following. I just want to make sure you guys are following. Any comments, Chris, before we go on to the next rule?
Unfortunately, I don't have any comments, but I can see that the stream itself is dealing with proper argumentation and how to identify flawed argumentation. And when you're identifying, what I want to acknowledge is when you're dealing with flawed argumentation, you're able to recognize what we call in our community ambush scholarship, because somebody's coming at you with a flawed position. As me and Melvin, in general, we talk about a lot of an array of topics, sports, sex, with females, of course, how females look. We argue about those things, and the argumentation is always at the forefront. Okay. Sure. And when we're talking about these type of things, rap music, women, culture, argumentation is at the forefront, and learning how to identify what the other person is arguing. Right. And what his talking points are. Now, but since we are in what we call a scholastic community and we argue for fun, we try to hone our skills on argumentation. Now, you know, me and Melvin, we've been laughing real hard lately about this one gentleman who presents a topic to me saying, Egypt or Torah, which one is better for our people? Now, Melvin, what would be one of the flaws in that argumentation? What would the person be trying to do by asking you to make an argument like that?
Well, they're trying to keep their argument from being attacked. That's first of all, that's the first thing I see. When you're not being clear about what your actual premise is, you're
Mm-hmm.
not trying to get your premise attacked, and that usually is a red flag for ambush scholarship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That means I'm going to
Now,
show up and debate you on this topic that's vague as hell, but you won't know my position. You won't even
mm-hmm.
know if we agree because I haven't given you anything necessarily to chew on. I haven't given you anything to look at and say, hey, do I agree with this argument or do I disagree? And if I disagree, here's why. You're not giving that opportunity because he's just keeping it very vague. And that's what I was saying earlier. How are you going to be able to explain which is better? Better at what? Better at food choices? Better at ruling class? Better at basketball courts? Like, what are you saying? Like you have to give
Mm-hmm.
some clarity to that premise. And so it just seems very, very vague.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think it's fair to ask somebody what's better for Black people? Wouldn't that be considered a hasty generalization? And if it's not, why not? If it is, why is it? If you say Torah or Egypt, which one is better for Black people?
Well,
Because technically, I don't speak for all Black people, and I've never lived in
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, what are you saying that Black people are not better off as is? So if you're saying they're not, then you need to specify which group of Black people you're talking about. Are you talking about Black people in America? If you are talking about Black people in America, are you talking about Black people in Los Angeles? Or are you talking about Black people in New York? Or maybe you're talking about Black people in a whole other country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that needs to be clarified. You just can't say,
Got you.
you know, which is better for Black people. Well, which Black people and how? How is either one going to be better? Are you saying they aren't already better off? Well, that's
Right.
key. Like it's very, very much key.
What do you mean? Yeah, it's very vague. Am I correct? It's kind of vague, ain't it?
Right.
It's like it's can you look up a presupposition? Can you let everybody know what a presupposition is? Because I mean, we're just talking about argumentation.
Right. So presupposition, I'm using the Oxford English dictionary here. It says the presupposition is a thing tactily assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of an argument or course of action.
Okay. So you have an assumption while you ask a question. Say, for instance, a presupposition is, I'm going to give you guys an example. Killing is bad. Do you still kill people?
Right. And they also want you to answer true or false or yes or no in those instances.
All right. Well, you already have it. You're already assuming that killing is bad. And then you ask me if I still kill. So if I answer that, if I say no, that's saying that I don't kill. And it's me saying, yes, I used to kill. So not only is asking questions with presuppositions loaded in them, they're also a form of a loaded question. You see what I'm saying? Because you're making an assumption before you ask the question. And it's all ambush scholarship to get you caught up. And you have to be able to identify these silly arguments that not just people in the community make, but people in general. You know, did you stop beating your wife? You guys got to understand what you hear. I've never beat my wife. What are you talking about? What do you mean did I stop?
Right. You see how you addressed it though? You didn't say yes or no. By saying yes or no, you're already playing into the trap because that's a trap question. It's not, you know, yes or no for you to ask that. If you answer yes or no, then it's assuming that that's something that has happened, even though you may deny it. Like that's something that you're automatically opening the door for that person to say, well, if you don't beat your wife, then what have you done to your wife?
Exactly.
Or you know what I'm saying? Like what have like okay, if you didn't beat her, did you cuss her out? Like that opens the door for that type of conversation where you can say, well, one, no, I have never beaten my wife, or second, how are you coming to this generalization? What makes you assume that? Like, so you just can't answer. And I think I see people fall for that trap all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like I said, Bear said, how can I assume that something is greater for all our people when there are many different cultures in this world that exist?
Right.
You have to be careful on how you answer questions, what topics you choose to engage somebody in, and you just have to say, is it even worth your time? And you have to
Exactly.
be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Good show. Good topic.
Yeah, it was just something quick I wanted to do. Let me finish up with the
Yeah, go ahead.
generalizations, though.
Go
All
ahead.
right, so this
Hey,
is
hey, Melvin, I got to get back to work. I'll be popping my live off probably about 12:45. Stop by.
okay. Yeah, I definitely will. I should be done way before then. So yeah, I'll definitely stop by. Appreciate you for coming
Okay,
through,
bet.
man.
No doubt.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Harris, Chris MVP Harris. Make sure you guys can check his channel out. In fact, I'll go ahead myself and plug that channel in the comments here in a second. You also can find him on my YouTube page. If you go to my YouTube page and click on channels, he'll be the third one there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the comments again. This is Chris MVP Harris. Came through. Appreciate you coming through, Chris. Also appreciate Free Spirit coming through. All right. So let's finish up, and then we'll go over to Chris's around noon. So here, Rule 9, background rates may be crucial. To persuade you that I am a first-rate archer, it is not enough to show you a bullseye I've made. You should ask politely to be sure. Yes, but how many times did you miss? Getting a bullseye in one shot tells quite a different story than, say, getting a bullseye in, say, 1,000, even though in both cases, I genuinely do have a bullseye to my name. You need a little more data, which is the same thing with the very argument that Chris brought up when someone says which is better for black people, Israel or Egypt. Like you need more data. You need to know the clarity here. Or again, here's another one. Leon's horoscope told him that he would meet a vivacious new stranger, and lo and behold, he did. Therefore, horoscopes are reliable. Dramatic as such an example may be, the problem is that we are only looking at one case in which your horoscope came true. To properly evaluate this evidence, we need to know something else as well. How many horoscopes didn't come true? When I survey my classes, we can usually find a few Leons out of 20 to 30 students. The other 19 or 29 horoscopes go nowhere. But kind of prediction that comes true only once out of 20 or 30 tries is hardly reliable. It's just lucky once in a while. It may have had some dramatic success, like my archery, but its success rate may still be abysmal. Another way to approach that is okay. How many women did Leon see before he met that vivacious new stranger? And is it possible that he met a vivacious new stranger prior to reading the horoscope? Is that'll test, the accuracy and the rate of that claim. Not saying that he couldn't have met that person, but are there other possibilities within the realm that have existed either prior to or after the reading? So you have to evaluate this. So here it says to evaluate the reliability of any argument, featuring a few vivid examples, then we need to know the ratio between the number of hits, so to speak, and the number of tries. It's a question of representativeness. Again, are the featured examples the only ones that are? Is the rate impressively high or low? Another case in point. The Bermuda Triangle area off Bermuda is famous as a place where many ships and planes have mysteriously disappeared, avoided at all costs. There have been several dozen disappearances in the past decade alone, no doubt. But several dozen out of how many ships and planes have passed through the area? Several dozen or several 100,000? If only 20, say, have disappeared out of maybe 200,000, then the disappearance rate in the Bermuda Triangle may well be normal or even unusually low, certainly not mysterious. Rule 10, statistics need a critical eye. Some people see numbers, any numbers, in an argument and conclude from the fact that alone that it may be a good argument. Statistics seem to have an aura of authority and definiteness. And did you know that 88% of doctors agree? In fact, the numbers take as much critical thinking as any other kind of evidence. Don't turn off your brain. For example, and I see this all the time. People show statistics, they show stats, and automatically the stats is automatically accepted. It's like, you know what? These are the stats, these are the facts. Such and such is the authority because they ran the testing. You can't question nothing. And that's not necessarily true. You need to look at how those stats are gained, who is the sample size, who is the authority, and does the authority have any type of agenda or biases that they're trying to support. For example, if I go to a website that is a .org, and this .org website does a poll saying that maybe 100,000 people in America prefer hamburgers more than they prefer chicken burgers, and this .org website is a hamburger establishment, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's something that doesn't need to give any authenticity or authority or definiteness to, because that particular establishment could very well be biased. In order for you to have an unbiased statistic approach, you need to have a organization that has no connection to whatever is being statistically tested. And this organization would be neutral, so whatever the facts are, this organization doesn't benefit from it. And that's key. But again, a lot of times people fall victim of statistics. They see the numbers, they see the stats, and automatically assume, well, the stats are the stats and you can't touch them. That's not necessarily true. So here's an example. After an era where some athletic powerhouse universities were accused of exploiting student athletes, leaving them to flunk out once their eligibility expired, college athletes are now graduating at higher rates. Many schools are now graduating more than 50% of their athletes. 50%, huh? Pretty impressive. But this figure, at first so persuasive, does not really do the job it claims to do. First, although many schools graduate more than 50% of their athletes, it appears that some do not. So this figure may well exclude the most exploitative schools that really concern people in the first place. The argument does not offer graduation rates, but it would be useful to know how more than 50% graduation rate compares with the graduation rate for all students at the same institutions. If it is significantly lower, athletes may still be getting the shaft. More importantly, this argument offers no reason to believe that college athletes' graduation rates are actually improving, because no comparison to any previous rates is offered. They're not comparing the athletes of 2021 that graduated with 2020 or 1998. There's no comparison. They're just saying 50%, and they're expecting you to take it and run with it. But you don't necessarily need to. You need to sit down and get some evidence, do some research. So it says here that the conclusion claims that the graduation rate is now higher, but without knowing the previous rate, it's impossible to tell. It's misleading. Numbers may offer incomplete evidence in other ways too. Rule 9, for example, tells us that knowing background rates may be crucial. Correspondingly, when an argument offers rates or percentages, the relevant background information usually must include the number of examples. For example, car thefts on campus may have doubled, but if this means that 2 cars were stolen rather than 1, there's not much to worry about. Another statistical pitfall is over precision. I see this a lot. Every year, this campus wastes 412,067 paper and plastic cups. It is time to switch to reusable cups. I'm all for ending the waste too. And I'm sure the amount of campus waste is huge, but no one really knows the precise number of cups wasted. And it's extremely unlikely to be exactly the same every year. Here, the appearance of exactness makes this evidence seem more authoritative than it really is. Like, and that's the thing. The question you should be asking when you see a number like that is, how do you know? Are you counting the paper and plastic cups when they are discarded in the trash or littered all over the place? Like, is there a real agenda to figure that out? Like, it's highly unlikely. And if you were, you got to have some documentation to back that evidence up, because that's a huge claim, and you ultimately are trying to persuade the campus to switch to reusable cups. And so it's just an art of persuasion with a little bit of information, but whether it's accurate or not is not the goal. The goal is to be persuading them to use reusable cups. And you got to watch out for that. Be wary also people who sell, like people that try to sell you things, they use that line very, very frequently. Here's the rate of percentage. Here's how many thousand. Here's how many pounds of plastic ends up in the waste of our oceans. So therefore, you should donate to our organization so we can help minimize this waste. Realizing that if you donate to that organization, it may not stop the problem. The problem isn't the organization. The problem is how the waste is getting there in the first place. And most people don't think about it. They automatically say, you know what? Giving my money to this organization because I feel sorry for the whales. And not realizing that something else is actually causing that problem. Be wary also of numbers that are easily manipulated. Pollsters know very well that the way a question is asked can shape how it is answered. These days, we're even seeing polls that try to change people's minds about, say, a political candidate just by asking loaded questions. For example, if you were to discover that she is a liar and a cheat, how would that change your vote? Loaded question. Then, too, many apparently hard statistics are actually based on guesswork or extrapolation, such as the data about semi-legal or illegal activities. Some people have a major motive not to reveal or report things like drug use, under-the-counter transactions, hiring illegal aliens, and the like, who have any confident generalizations about how widespread they are. Yet again, if kids keep watching more TV at current rates, by 2025, they'll have no time left to sleep. Right. And by 2040, they'll be watching 36 hours a day. Extrapolation in such cases is perfectly mathematically, possible mathematically. But after a certain point, it tells you nothing. It really doesn't. Rule 11, I think we're almost done. Let's see here. Just want to get, let's see here. Okay, cool. Rule 11, consider counterexamples. Counterexamples are examples that contradict your generalization. No fun, maybe, but counterexamples actually can be a generalizer's best friends if you use them early and use them well. Look for them on purpose, and systematically, it is the best way to sharpen your own generalizations. And to probe more deeply into your theme, consider this argument once again. French fries are unhealthy, high in fat. Milkshakes are unhealthy, high in fat and sugar. Deep fried chicken and cheeseburgers are unhealthy, high in fat. Therefore, all fast foods are unhealthy. This argument offers multiple and apparently representative examples. However, as soon as you start thinking about the counterexamples, instead of just more examples, you will find that the argument over generalizes. Subway sandwiches, for example, are fast food as well, but vegetables and buns are the primary ingredients. Meats and cheeses are add-ons, and nothing is deep fried. So it turns out that not all fast foods are unhealthy. If you can think of counterexamples to a generalization that you want to defend, then you need to adjust your generalization. If the last argument were yours, for instance, you might change the conclusion to many fast foods are unhealthy, or fast foods that serve French fries, milkshakes, deep fried chicken, and cheeseburgers are unhealthy. Or establishments in the South, fast food establishments in the South, are unhealthy. Or fast food establishments by Yum Brands or whomever are unhealthy. You know, you have to specify that argument. You just can't just generalize and leave it hanging because they're right. Subway doesn't fry anything, and the meats and cheeses are add-ons. They don't necessarily, you're not required to have them, but you're asked if you want them. So like, such a counterexample may also prompt you to think more deeply about what it is about fast foods that tend to make them unhealthy. Is it partly that deep frying with huge fat load that results in such a quick and easy way of cooking? Highly processed foods such as fast food, meat, and cheese, and milkshake ingredients also tend to be fatty or unhealthy in other ways. So maybe what you really want to say is that the demand for quick cooking and cheap standardized ingredients tends to make the results less healthy, although this is not invariable, as the example of Subway sandwiches suggests. That's a very, very good point, because you can have a fast food establishment that serves healthy food. You can have a fast food establishment that serves healthy milkshakes, or really just healthy shakes, period. They don't necessarily have to be, milk based. You can have a, vegan establishment that serves quote unquote fast food, but doesn't use unhealthy means. So yeah, that needs to be cleared up. Ask yourself about counterexamples when you are assessing others' arguments, as well as evaluating your own, as whether their conclusions may have to be revised and limited or rethought in more subtle and complex directions. The same rules apply both to others' arguments and yours. The only difference is that you have a chance to correct your overgeneralizations yourself. Right, I believe that is the end of the chapter 2. So next time we'll go over arguments by analogy, and I think the fourth, we'll do the fourth one next time as well, is sources, and it goes into how to do sources. And again, this is trying to help you guys formulate a pretty strong argument. Again, the book is called a Rulebook for Arguments. This is actually the fourth edition. Fifth edition is available on Amazon, but the fourth edition is the one I have. It's also easily affordable. You can buy it used for like $6 something. I think I've seen somewhere where you can maybe buy a new paperback copy for about $10. But sometimes the prices range. As always, sometimes you get 30 or even $50 for a copy. But this is basically the book I'm reading. I do recommend it for those who love to argue, for those who are into debating, whether it's academic or just on the social media side. Definitely get this book. If you're having trouble with your arguments, if you're having trouble in debates, this is what you need. If anyone needs more information on this book, or if you need a copy of this book, definitely reach out to me. I'll make sure to put my email in the chat. Reach out to me, and then I can also give you my overall views of this book, as well as any other information you need about the book. There are other places that may have much more competitive pricing. I have those links as well. So I just put my email in the chat. So just go ahead and email me if you have any questions, concerns, or anything. But that's pretty much today. Thank again, Free Spirit Lady, and also Chris Harris for coming through. Appreciate y'all. Look forward to the next one. I'll try to do it tomorrow. We'll see how the day goes. But yeah, you guys stay tuned. Thanks for showing up. Make sure you guys like the video, share the video. Make sure that you post any comments that you may have, any questions that you may have, and look forward to seeing you guys next time. If you have any questions or comments, always hit the link. I'll make sure to put the link in the chat. You can always come through, interrupt, and ask any questions for clarity or comments you want to make. So next time, peace out. Again, this is Melvin Jefferson, Grand Archivist for Team Osiris. Again, we are our solution is real in science, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next time. Peace out.